Runaways was a great time for rock and roll, and there was one band that made an impression. Girl rock band. They had the ups and downs because they were placed together, and today, even in their crazy past, they still went on to make a name. They can show and get up and going. The Runaways was a creation of Kim Fowley, who was known as a record promoter, and a band manager. He was also a songwriter and had wrote some of the songs for the Beach Boys in the 60s. Fowley had met a teenager named Carrie at an Alice Cooper party. She was at the time, and Fowley came up with the idea of starting an all-girl rock band. Carrie introduced Joan Larkin, aka Joan Jett, to Kim Fowley, as she was a guitarist, and then found the drummer Sammy Presvento, also known as Sandy West. Had started out with Carrie Combe, changed to Mickey Steele, and after that started recording. They made a switch, Mickey to being a bass player, and then they found a new vocalist. They had found one more guitarist to mix in, and that was Lita Ford. She knew a lot of the same. Joan Jett met a girl named Cherie Curry at a disco place named the and she became the lead singer. They liked her glam rock and bad girl image and fit well with the rest of the group. They lastly then got the member of Steely that left, and then they acquired Jamie Foxx. They then played at the showcase in Las and was soon after Mercury label. 76 and a 2-month tour in the United States, and later ended up in Europe. Fowley didn't travel, so they ended up having a band manager who was known to be a pedophile. And then they had finished their tour in Europe, and they finally made their second album called Queen of Noise. Without the girls having their guidance and being able to have their families around, they started to go down the wrong road. They were reported of doing drugs and trashing their hotel rooms. The showing in Japan was Cherry Bomb. Amazing. Jackie, who had struggled with being overworked, had left the band after their tour, before the end of the tour in Japan. She also had problems with, she thought she was going to commit. Cherie Curry then, she was known as a sexual, decided to quit and make a better life for herself. All in all, the Japan tour itself was the main break, even though the United States, they were not quite big. Once they left Japan, the band was no longer one. Once they got to LA, they had hired Vicky Tlusher to replace Jackie as the bass guitarist. Joan had then taken over They made the album of the night and toured with a different bass player named Lori McAllister. They got the 5th album before it was released, and they finally broke up because they didn't have the money. After they all broke up, the main members, first Jackie Fox, she took a musical career, and she started to become a record promotion executive at a record label. She had gotten tired of that brief job and ended up publishing as an executive for Tom Petty's publisher. Then in 1986, she was done with music and decided to become a lawyer. She went to UCLA and got and she wanted to cover up her rock past. She band after Jackie Fox had left. She felt free. Then she didn't do any more music. She had appeared in Waverly Lane in 1983, and then Twilight Zone, the movie, the same year. She had also some appearances on TV like Matlock and Murder, She Wrote. She had many problems in her life with alcohol and drugs, and wasn't clean until 1989. She had become a after that. Then in 1990, she had a daughter, and now lives in Southern. In 2010, the Runaways had been brought together to make a movie about the struggles during their time. Out of all the band members, the one that really went on was Joan Jett. After they broke up, she spent most of her time in England and she had worked with the former members of the Sex Pistols. After a time, she returned to Los Angeles and also tried acting. She played in the movie that was based off the Runaways themselves. We're All Crazy Now. She after that made her first solo album couldn't get anybody to produce her record, so she ended up making her own record label, Heart Records. She was the first female to ever do that. Then she made the record Bad Reputation. They had distributed the records at her own showings. Then she decided not many liked the sound, but she kept on going. She finally made I Love Rock and Roll, and it was a hit. And then she made Do You Want to Touch? Oh Yeah. That got people onto it. She once again decided to try acting and was in the role Light of Day but the film failed. She later on decided to try more acting and was featured in Baby Mama and Shrek. Even with all, she kept touring, and she said, I love playing fairs. I think it's great. You get out and you see America. You also have wonderful, very crazy crowds. You see families, you see lots of kids, and it's great. Then in 2010, she decided to go and help with the movie of the Runaways, and she had been casted to play her part was Kristen Stewart. Today, Joan is devoted to animal rights, wishes to become a vegan, and is a spokesman for PETA. Sandy West was who never really got her big break. She tried her hardest in other bands, but failed. She made a band named the Sandy West Band and only got one solo. After that, she started doing gigs around the area that she lived in the 80s and the 90s. She really made it big after the band. She never really made it big after the band broke up. She had many problems in drugs and alcohol, which caused her to have problems keeping a job. She worked some construction jobs, but also was a collector for drug dealers. In 1994, Jackie, Cherie, and Sandy performed once more. Then she was diagnosed with lung cancer in 2005. They never got a full get-together with the Runaways. She later passed October 21st, 2006, giving up her life. Lastly, we come down to Lita Ford. After the Runaways broke up, she decided to take vocal lessons and carry out odd jobs to support herself. In 1983, she was into heavy metal and got her first solo album, Out of Blood. For a while, she wasn't heard from, only because then she came out with Lita in 1988. She became quite famous, made another album called Kiss Me Deadly. She was successful for a short time, then was gone for a decade. She decided she'd get married, had 2 sons, and homeschooled them for a long time. Then they moved to the Caribbean, and her husband had made a business / real estate company. He became quite successful, and then she came back, and finally in 2009, she popped back up, and the album was Wicked Wonderland. In 2010, the movie came out, had declined the invitation to be. After 16 years with her husband, she later got divorced. The divorce inspired another album that she called Living Like a Runaway. The album was released. They started out as strangers mainly and became a band. They weren't long-lived, but impacted the world. They had their ups and downs, but they may have been separated. But also, they became strong and continued their lives. The 70s was the greatest time for rock and roll, and they lived life to the fullest.